Good afternoon, boys and girls. Today we're going to have a look at the topic photosynthesis. Um, Photosynthesis, as we all know, you should have some knowledge regarding photosynthesis by now, although we are going to look somewhat deeper into the topic in this lesson. So, who can tell me what is photosynthesis? Okay. And who can tell me where does photosynthesis takes place, plants or animals? Okay, so boys and girls, we're going to have a deeper look into photosynthesis and then we will take it from there. So before we kick off the lesson, first I would like to see where your knowledge is at and whether you do have the right amount of knowledge to persuade the new lesson, the new study material which we are going to see and work through during this lesson. So I have a few questions and I would like you to please raise your hands if you have the answer. So who can tell me what does the symbol CO2 stand for? Okay, carbon dioxide. Okay, and who can tell me where does it come from? Okay, right, yes, it's exhaled. Okay, and then what is the symbol O? What does that stand for? Oxygen. No. Right, and what is the simple name for the molecule C6H12 and O6? Right, slightly a bigger molecule than your normal oxygen and carbon dioxide. Okay, boys and girls, so that is glucose, which is a vital molecule in this lesson and in the process of photosynthesis. So please keep that in mind. Boys and girls, then we're going to quickly look at photosynthesis as a whole. So I already heard a few answers regarding what photosynthesis is and what it is about, the different subsections of photosynthesis. So once again, boys and girls, photosynthesis, as we all know, takes place in plants. Okay. Now, more specifically, we all know that all living things require energy to stay alive, right? So we know plants and animals both require energy to be able to stay alive. Okay. We also covered this section in cellular respiration, where we spoke about how energy is created within the body. So, boys and girls, human beings and animals, they receive their energy from other animals, right? Or plants. So we receive our energy by consuming. Therefore, we are also known as consumers, right? So when you eat, you receive energy. That is where your energy essentially comes from, right? And therefore we are known as consumers. Plants, on the other hand, are different. They are not consumers, but rather producers. Therefore, they produce their own energy through photosynthesis. So as we all know, once again, photosynthesis takes place within the plant, and it is the process in which plants produce their own energy in order to sustain its own life. Okay, so plants obtain their energy from the sun by converting the sun's energy, otherwise known as radiant energy, into glucose, which is then later stored as starch, which essentially provides the energy to the plant, right? And this all happens through photosynthesis, right? That is the whole process of photosynthesis, where sun energy or radiant energy is converted into glucose and oxygen, right? And then we know that the formal definition of photosynthesis will then be a chemical process by which glucose is produced using radiant energy. Okay, so that's exactly what we've just discussed, right? So keep that in mind while we go through. So boys and girls, if you're going to look on the board, you will see there a picture, a very simplified picture of the process of photosynthesis, how it takes place, and how the plant uses the sun energy and the carbon dioxide to allow photosynthesis to take place. So as you will see there, we have the plant on the board. We can see the plant takes the light energy of the sun, or otherwise known as the radiant energy. Okay, it absorbs the energy, and then it also, alongside with water, which it receives from rain or otherwise watering, whether it's a garden plant or wild plants, and then of course carbon dioxide, which is exhaled by humans. Okay, so the plant uses those and then it creates the byproducts. Right, boys and girls? So there's a nice picture, and that is the process of photosynthesis simplified. Now, we can ask ourselves the question, where does photosynthesis take place? Who can tell me? Okay, in the green part, right, in the leaves of the plant, that is correct. More specifically on a micro level, who can tell me where does it take place? Okay, in the chloroplast, correct. So, boys and girls, within the plant, we are aware that photosynthesis takes place in the green sections of the plant. Okay, not only the leaves, keep in mind, but all of the green places in the plant, right? All of the green sections of the plant. And therefore, the reason the plant is green, we know, is due to the chlorophyll, which is found in the chloroplast, right? So therefore, photosynthesis essentially takes place in the chloroplast, right? So in the chloroplast, which also has its own substructures, photosynthesis takes place there. Therefore, that's why we know it takes place in the green parts, because chlorophyll is in the chloroplast, which therefore causes the green color in the plant. Okay, so when you say it takes place in the green part, it means it takes place in the chloroplast, essentially, right? So we can have a look at the structure of a chloroplast on the board. This is once again also quite simplified version of a chloroplast. So you can see there that within the chloroplast you have your inner membrane, your intermembrane space, you have your stroma and lamella. Okay, you have the outer membrane, the thylakoid, the granum, and the stroma. There, so you can see the structure on the board there, and that is then essentially where photosynthesis mainly takes place. Then, as already discussed earlier, boys and girls, we know photosynthesis requires certain products or molecules or substances, right, to be able to conduct the process, right? For photosynthesis to be conducted, certain products are required. For instance, photosynthesis cannot take place if oxygen or carbon dioxide, is not present. Okay, it cannot take place if water is not present, and nor can it take place if radiant or sunlight is not present. Okay, so you need sunlight, carbon dioxide, and water, all three of them, right, to be present simultaneously in order for photosynthesis to effectively take place. And as we all know, that when these three molecules, or when these three chemicals or substances, sunlight, the carbon dioxide, and the water, works together and reacts within the chloroplast of the plant, we know that as a product, glucose, right, C6H12O6, is produced, as well as oxygen, right? Hence the reason plants are so important to sustain life on Earth. Not only themselves, but all living organisms, because our oxygen, which we breathe in and out, comes from plants, right? So that's why it's so important. It is a byproduct along with the glucose that the plant produces. The glucose is then utilized by the plant to continue photosynthesizing, right? The glucose is utilized during cellular respiration, which we've discussed as well. And then the oxygen, of course, is excreted, and it is then used by living organisms, right? And then how will these different products enter the plant? So boys and girls, when you think of the carbon dioxide, the water, and the sunlight, how will they enter the plant? In which manner do you think? Okay, good. So the carbon dioxide, we know, diffuses into the leaves of the plant, right? So the carbon dioxide which we exhale, the molecules will diffuse into the leaves through the stomata, right, on the bottom of the leaf, and it will enter the plant there. The water, we know, will enter the plant through the roots in the soil. So when it rains, the soil becomes moist, and the roots of the plant will then absorb the water out of the soil, right? And the water will then travel through the plant, through the xylem, okay, and to the rest of the plant. And then the sunlight also enters the plant through the leaves, right? So that's how these substances enter the plant to enable photosynthesis to take place. And then we also know, once again, after all the necessary products are received, then photosynthesis can take place. So, boys and girls, there's a few questions, okay, just to test your knowledge, to make sure that you are indeed up to date with the lesson that was just presented. Photosynthesis is indeed a more complex topic than we've just discussed, and it does go a lot deeper than we've discussed, right? But for the purposes of this lesson, we've established a basis for you to build upon. So after this lesson, you should be able to understand what photosynthesis is, where it takes place, and the main concept and principle of photosynthesis, on which we can build in diving into the deeper and more complex processes of photosynthesis. So who can tell me what is photosynthesis? Just as a recap, okay, the process in which radiant energy is converted into glucose, correct? Okay, where does it take place? The chloroplast, correct? Okay, what are the requirements? Carbon dioxide, glucose, okay, and water, great. Right, what are the products that are formed afterwards, after the reaction? Glucose, okay, and oxygen. Boys and girls, I made a mistake, okay. The products required, I accidentally said glucose, not glucose, okay, carbon dioxide, water, and sunlight. Okay, then does photosynthesis occur in plants and animals? No, we know photosynthesis occurs only within producers, right? Not within plants. And where does the carbon dioxide enter the plant? We said through the leaves, right? Through the leaves, through the stomata on the bottom of the leaf. And then where does the water that the plant requires take place? Where does that enter the plant? Through the roots, correct. Boys and girls, so it seems that you have the right amount of knowledge, okay, after this lesson to dive deeper into photosynthesis, which we will then definitely discuss in our next lesson. Boys and girls, okay,